Interest in a new marijuana tax appears to be at a new high, no pun intended. As we report on local, state, and federal budget woes, Colorado Congressman Jared Polis, a supporter, makes the argument that was summarized in Politico. They wrote, quote, "Get marijuana out of the hands of dope dealers, tax it like you do cigarettes, then sit back and watch the money pour in." Colorado lawmakers met just last week to figure out a way to tax the drug, which voters legalized for recreational use in November, along with voters in Washington state. And more states are weighing in. A bill in Maine would legalize and tax recreational pot. It has 35 co-sponsors. Joining me now, Republican strategist and pollster Chris Wilson and political strategist and principal of Impact Strategies, Angela Rye. Good morning.
Good morning, Chris.
So, Chris, the Colorado Center on Law and Policy has an estimate. They say legalized pot would bring in $24 million in excise tax revenue, $8.7 million in state sales tax revenue, and $14.5 million in local tax revenue. And supporters are obviously framing it by stressing this is a potentially huge windfall for states, cities that need this kind of money. Is that argument going to start working?
Well, it's all about the spending issue. It seems like everything we get back to comes down to spending. But I do think it's a bit strange that the thought process here is the same nanny state liberals that want to ban big sodas and ban cigarettes now want to legalize a carcinogenic product because they think that's going to create more tax revenue coming in. It's like the liberal idea is if it's created by a big company, it must be bad. But if you have a couple of guys in Birkenstocks in Boulder growing it in their backyard, then it's a good thing, and let's go ahead and tax it. The day that Philip Morris starts making this, they're going to decide again that it's bad and start trying to ban it. It's whether or not it's going to create additional revenue. I think there's arguments on both sides of that, but it's just, I think, a whole strange argument that let's, instead of cutting spending and figure out how to solve the problems there, let's go find additional things to tax.
Is this, Angela, a bunch of hippies in tie-dyed shirts who are trying to come up with an economic argument to do something that they like doing when they're in their backyard in their Birkenstocks?
Hardly. I don't think this is a Birkenstock challenge at all, Chris. I actually think you have a situation where folks are utilizing marijuana for all types of things, whether it's recreationally or for medical usage. It has caused or been the result of a lot of folks benefiting from, the usage of it and not suffering harm any longer. And really, when we look at it, I mean, you can watch any pharmaceutical drug commercial and there are a laundry list of side effects, and a lot of folks don't experience that level of side effects from marijuana usage. Am I a strong proponent of it? No. However, I will say that if they're going to utilize it, they're going to legalize it, they should definitely tax it. State budgets, and if the feds decided to move on this, could benefit from an additional revenue raiser.
And even Republican Senator Rand Paul, Chris, said this week, even though he's not for legalizing marijuana, he is for decriminalizing it. Let me play that for people who didn't see it earlier in the week.
There are a lot of young people who do this, and then later on in their 20s, they grow up and get married and they quit doing things like this. I don't want to put them in jail and ruin their life. Look, the last two presidents could conceivably have been put in jail for their drug use, and I really think, look what would have happened. It would have ruined their lives. They got lucky, but a lot of poor kids, particularly in the inner city, don't get lucky.
So, Chris, we're seeing change on a lot of issues in Washington. Is marijuana potentially one of them?
Well, I think it is. It's difficult to argue with what Senator Paul says. There's a lot of people who are prosecuted for this because they don't have the resources to protect themselves legally, and I think that's definitely an argument that is worth making. Again, but the whole process here, the idea of looking for additional things to tax, I guess, is what bothers me most about it. It's not about the legalization of it. It's the fact that Washington and even state governments can't cut spending enough to where they can balance their budgets. So instead of that, they go out and look for more levels or more things to tax, and legalizing marijuana is just the next on the laundry list. And where do they go from there? And I think that's probably the bigger issue to me, not the legalization of marijuana, but just the fact that they can't get their spending under control.
Angela, we're out of time, but let me ask you really quickly. We've got 2 states now, a third considering it. Is this just the start?
I think it is just the start, and I wholeheartedly disagree that this is about an out-of-control spending problem. We have an economic crisis that we're just recovering from, and so we've got to figure out some real basic common-sense solutions.
Angela Rye, Chris Wilson, great talking to both of you.
Thanks, Chris.
Former South African